ready to do life and business on your terms and truly live your big ticket life. You either make excuses or you choose to level up. Amazing guests living the big ticket life. Woo! Woo! Brandon Brittingham.
Appreciate you having me here today, man.
It's that kind of discernment, that kind of focus, that kind of forward thinking that's so important if you're going to succeed in business today.
Jeff and I are like friends. We're real friends.
We are like And so you unlock fortune and freedom without all the stress that normally comes along with it.
It all comes down to your why. You know, your business, why are you doing it? You know, how is it going to change the world and what's it going to do for your family?
I want you to celebrate your success.
Talk about the struggle. But I promise you, the story is in your struggle.
They'll never be able to say that about me because people only see me working hard at anything that I'm doing whenever they see me.
Focused on your success and the success of those around you.
But being that constant in your community, good or bad, whether things are great in the community, bad in the community, who's steady?
Unapologetically do business and life on your terms and truly live your big ticket life. Amazing guests living the big ticket life. And we discuss how they do it and the big ticket methods they use. The things that make your life successful so you do life and business on your terms.
In and of itself, the only limitations that we really have on ourselves is the ones that we allow to be put on ourselves. And most people don't look at it in that perspective.
There's nothing wrong with being humble, but there's also nothing wrong with stepping into your superpower and letting people know who you are.
Get ready to do life and business on your terms and truly live your big ticket life. All right. Welcome back. Another show on the Big Ticket Life. Pleasure to have my guest, Dave Albin, with us this week. And Dave, welcome to the show. We're going to just jump right in, if that's all right with you.
Let's go.
All right. So, you know, this is a topic that's front of mind right now for me because I am in the midst, as we have our show today, of producing my book, my first book. I've written 4 other books for like niche purposes to like sell masterminds and, you know, for my retail business. But this is like a book to sit on a bookshelf that people buy because they want to be inspired and lift themselves up. Right. And so this question I want to ask you is around, you know, how we're coded in our childhood, because you have an interesting childhood. Yeah. And so I'll preface it with this statement of, we know today we can affect our DNA, and where there's gene therapy, we know we can affect all of that as we age, as we get older. We can do positive things for our health. So being that we can do that now, to me, the inverse stands true, that our DNA gets coded by our experiences and the inputs as a child. And I think there's science there as well, right? Like I believe that through the age of 7, we're really programmed. And so your life prior to age 7 was interesting. Definitely some childhood traumas. You know, born in Hollywood to a single mother and adopted by your aunt and uncle at the age of 5. And at age 11, you were told that your aunt and uncle weren't really your parents. So walk us through that and walk our listeners and watchers through how you feel that kind of framed your life and what you had to overcome to find the success you found, because you've had some tremendous successes in your life.
Well, you know, Mom did the best she could, right? Because my parents came from a generation, man. They saved the world, right? You know, my biological father was a pilot in Korea. The father that raised me was a war hero in Europe fighting the Nazis. My best friend's dad was in Pearl Harbor fighting the Japanese. And then while the men were off at war, right, the women were home doing everything. I mean, my mom was known as Rosie the Riveter, my biological mother. When the war was going on, she was working for McDonnell Douglas, man. She was building airplanes. And so, you know, she wasn't afraid of hard work, that's for sure. And then, you know, 2 months before I was born, my biological father, we don't really know what happened to him. We just know that he injured himself. They put a plate in his head to save his life. And 2 months before I was born, man, he was always complaining about pain and how much, didn't know if he could put up with much more. And one day he told my mom, I'm going to the grocery store, and we never saw or heard from him again. So that put my mom in a really rocky place, man. She had 2 other boys. We had a cousin and a grandmother, and all 6 of us were living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hollywood, California, and right across the street from Hollywood High School. And then when I was 5, it was like, that was the turning point. She couldn't afford us. She couldn't make ends meet. And so she did a very loving thing. Yeah. She got a hold of her sister and said, hey, would you adopt David? And she did. So Bob and Pat Albin, grabbed me up from Hollywood at the age of 5, took me to Long Beach, California. And in the beginning, man, it was a beautiful life. Bob was a decorated military, veteran, and he was a career veteran. He was in the National Guard and the Army, and he was an officer. And so, there was income, and we had a nice house, and there was always food on the table. And we went camping because we lived in California. So we went to Yosemite and Big Bear and Lake Arrowhead. And so for the first 6 years until I was 11, everything was perfect. I mean, it was like the perfect childhood. And then on the first day of summer, man, in 1964, Mom came and got me out of the TV room that morning and said, David, we need to talk to you. They set me down at the kitchen table, and my mom, I call her my mom. She was my aunt, but I still call her mom. She put her hand on my hand, and she said, David, what we need to tell you is we're not your parents. Okay, well, what does that mean? At 11 years old, you can't really process that, right? In fact, she even went on to say, your Aunt Dean? I'm like, yeah. And she goes, well, that's actually your mother. And I remember thinking, I don't even like her, right? Because she bothered me.
Wow.
Because when she was around me, Jeff, I want to be really clear, because she was always touching me, right? She always wanted to sit by me. She wanted to hug me and kiss me and hold me. Well, duh, I was her son, right? So anytime she could be around me, right, she wanted to be close to me. Well, that's when my life took a hard turn, because very, very, very shortly after they told me this, they both started drinking. Well, now they had sworn off drinking when they adopted me at 5. So again, right after they told me, now my dad was under a lot of pressure. He was working in the Pentagon. We had just come out of the Bay of Pigs, all the missiles and the Cuban crisis and all that was going on in Cuba. Kennedy had just been assassinated in November of 1963. So there was a lot going on in my dad's world. And I'm not trying to justify, but I'm just saying there were reasons, I guess, he started drinking again, and telling me that I wasn't his son bothered him. And so they both started drinking, and that's when it got ugly really fast, especially for Bob. He just couldn't handle the alcohol. And I think my mom was drinking with him just to try to keep up with him. And so one day they went off to the store, and I knew where the booze was. They were hiding it in plain sight. I went over there, I opened the cabinet, and I brought it out. It was a big old half-gallon of brandy, nasty smelling stuff, man. And I poured it in a coffee cup about half full, Jeff, and I downed it. And man, I never had a chance, man. I mean, I literally believe I was an alcoholic right on the spot, because it just took over. You feel like Superman. It was just exhilarating kind of a thing.
Right.
And so that just led, right? Because once I got on that path, the next thing you know, you're hanging around the wrong people. You're getting more booze. You're getting into drugs. So by the time I got into junior high school and high school, I was doing hard drugs. In fact, when I was junior in high school, within the first month of my junior year, they called me in the office and said, "You're out. We're done. You're expelled." And so now I'm kind of out on my own at this point. And things just got really weird, really bad. A lot of bad circumstances. Guns and prostitutes and gangs, and it escalated from there. Right. It's your peer group, man. You start hanging around with these people, you start acting out like they do. And then after a few marriages, like 3 of them, on June 8th of 1988, when I woke up that morning, that was it. That was the day. That was threshold. And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm out. I cannot do this, because I was in so much physical and emotional pain, including spiritual pain. So I was married to a woman at that time. I'm in my 3rd marriage, right? She's got 3 kids. And I married her because I thought, wow, maybe I'll calm down because of these 3 kids. Well, it looked good on paper, but it just didn't. When you're that grossly addicted, you need more than just, this idea, because I married a woman with 3 kids, I'm going to be able to stop using. And so that morning it was like, okay, I'm done. This is it. And my first thought was just load my pistol, put it in my mouth, and take my own life. And then I thought, wait a minute. Do you have any idea what that's going to do to those kids and this family that you've married? And because I was living in the basement and they were living upstairs just to get away from me, because I was pretty violent. And I remember thinking, man, you just can't do that. That's going to destroy those kids' lives. Hell, you're killing them too when you pull that trigger. So figure out another way, pal. And the next thing I know, I had this thought in my head, call Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, what's interesting about that is that I didn't know who AA was. I had no references. I didn't know anybody in AA. I'd never been to AA. And yet there was the thought. Well, it was enough, because I called. And I got a woman on the phone, and apparently I convinced her, gave her enough information where she called a guy to come get me. And they literally came and picked me up on June 8th of 88. And when I got to AA, man, I was home. I had never felt more close to a group of people than I was in Alcoholics Anonymous. I felt like I belonged there. And these guys were really, really amazing at helping me. And so one day turned into 2, and 2 days turned into a week, and a week turned into a month. And after I got to a month, they gave me a coin. It said 1 month on it. And then I got one for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 1 year. And then this last June 8th here in 2023, I picked up a chip for 35 years. So
fantastic. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah. And I owe it to AA and my brothers and sisters there, man, because the AA works. If you work it, right, it works.
Yeah.
Well, what was happening is that because I had insomnia in the early days, I was up late one night, and 3 o'clock in the morning, there I'm watching an infomercial, and there he is, Mr. Enthusiasm, a young Tony Robbins is selling personal power, right? And he said a couple of things that really got my interest. One, he said, we'll do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. And I thought, well, that's why I drank. I was drinking to try to avoid pain or gain pleasure. And then it disappeared, including the drugs. I couldn't find anything that looked like avoiding pain or gaining pleasure. And then he said that, how we make decisions is we do it based on inspiration or desperation. And I thought, wow, I'm pretty desperate. So yeah, man, I signed up for his program, and they sent it to you. And it came in a box, and it came on these little white things called cassette tapes, right?
Yep.
And so it was a 30-day program. So I plugged it in, did what the man taught me to do, and brother, it worked. And so I had a buddy in AA, and we got to talking, and I let him borrow my program. Well, 7 years later, I'm talking about, this is 1988. Now I'm in 1995. And Dan, my buddy in AA, who I loaned the program to, said, hey, he called me and said, hey, Albie, did you know that Tony Robbins is coming to town? I said, no, had no clue. He goes, dude, come on. We got to go see this guy. Right. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll go with you. And he goes, great, let me call you back. So he called me back about an hour later, and he said, done. We pick up the tickets at will call. And here's what they told us to do. Number 1, bring a good attitude. I said, Dan, how much was the ticket? He said, $695. I said, Dan, for $700, I'll play full out. Don't you worry. And he said, be ready to play full out, drink a lot of water, hydrate, bring snacks, because we're going to spend a lot of time in the room. What an understatement that was. And then he said, and as he's getting ready to get off the phone, he goes, oh, wait, I forgot to tell you something. We're going to be doing a firewalk. I remember thinking, oh, hell no. You're out of your mind. I'm not saying anything to Dan, right, Jeff? I'm just kind of going along. I'm quiet. And I don't want to, I'm saying, no, hell no, I'm not doing it. But I don't want Dan to think that, right? So I'm just kind of going along with it. Yeah, sure, Dan. Sure, we'll do a firewalk. Well, when he hung up the phone, that's a hard no. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, so the first firewalk was the first stress test against that plan full out.
Well, that and, fear had been controlling my life my entire life. So fear was making all my decisions for me, right? So it was no different than hearing about a firewalk. Because, again, I didn't know what a firewalk was. What the hell's that? Right. I don't know. I had no references for that either. I just know I said no. Well, the day comes, right? And we get to the event. Tony takes the stage at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the next thing I know, it's after midnight. We've been in a room for 10 hours with Tony Robbins. Talk about bring snacks, because you're going to spend a lot of time in the room, was an understatement. I would have starved to death, right? And all of a sudden, it's after midnight. All of a sudden, Tony goes, "Take your shoes off." And I'm like, "Oh no, I see where you're going with that, pal. You're not tricking me." And then I'm with 3,500 people, by the way, at this event, right? And they're all taking their shoes off. And I'm like, "People, no, you're falling for it. Don't go towards the light," right? And now I've got a dilemma. What do I do? Because they're all taking their shoes off. So if I don't take my shoes off, they're going to know I'm a coward. And he's taking you out into a big parking lot, right? So I'm like, "All right, well, just take your shoes off. And when you get out there, just go hide in the back. No one's going to know." Well, it gets worse, because as soon as before he gets you to go outside, he gets everybody chanting and clapping, right? So 3,500 people are going, "Yes, yes, yes." And I'm thinking, "Oh, what a dog and pony show this is," right?
Right.
It gets worse. Because when he gets you outside,
Kind of like from the infomercials, but wait, there's more. But wait, it gets worse.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more, right? Because when he gets you outside in this giant parking lot where they facilitate the firewalk, he's got African drummers, right? So now it's dun 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 dun. Everybody's clapping and everybody's screaming yes, and I'm walking out there going, "You've got to be kidding me!" I mean, I've never experienced anything like this in my life. To this day, I've never experienced anything like this in my life, except the Tony Robbins seminar. Well, when you get out there logistically, Jeff, what they do is they start a big fire that early day, like when he gets on stage at 2, right? And that pit is probably 30 feet wide, 70 feet long. And they stack wood on it all day, right? So it renders. So at the end of the evening, you've got this big, giant pile of coals. Well, what they do is they would take a wheelbarrow over to that pit and they'd load it up, and then they bring the wheelbarrow and they would put it in between 2 lanes. And kind of like you're seeing there, they shovel it, right? And so they sprinkle those coals on top of the lane. And the fire lane's probably, I don't know, 3 feet by 18 feet, something like that. And again, they take a flathead shovel and they sprinkle those coals out, and that's what you walk on, right? Well, I'm not going anywhere near that. I want as far away from that as I possibly can, so I'm hiding in the back. Well, the thing is, Robbins he researched this. He knows that firewalking is literally one of the most life-changing experiences any human will go through. So he doesn't want anybody not to do it. So he knows there's going to be people like me that are going to go in the back and hide out. So what's he do? He trains people to come find you.
Yeah.
And here they come. Here he comes. Here comes this guy, man. And he sees me and he gets about 20 feet from me and he kind of looks at me with a puzzled look on his face. And he's like, "Are you okay?" And of course, when we're not, what do we say? "Oh, sure. I'm good. I'm fine, man. Yeah. Nothing to see here. Move along, sport." Right. And all of a sudden he goes, "Well, listen, hey, man, are you going to walk tonight?" And I said, "Absolutely not." Like, and I said it with that tonality. And he's like, "Hey, man, that's cool. That's not a problem. We don't want you to do anything you don't want to do." And I'm thinking, okay, I like this guy. He's going to get me out of here. Well, now here's a stranger. By the way, Jeff, I don't know who this guy is today, right? Because without him, I'm not on the Big Ticket podcast, Big Ticket, Big Life, man, right? With you, if he didn't ask me this next question. And the question was, well, wouldn't you at least like to watch? And I thought for a minute, yeah, sure. Let's watch these people burn their feet off. That should be entertaining. Let's do that. Well, he goes, "Well, listen, man, you can't see anything from back here. You just get in line." I had 3,500 people in front of me. I can't see it. I can hear it. They're already walking, right? People are already walking and they're screaming and yelling. They're celebrating. The drums are going. Everybody's chanting. I mean, again, it is intense. And so I get in line, right? And so I'm just kind of walking along and, listening and observing. And all of a sudden this guy comes up to me and he whispers in my ear and he says, "He knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go." And pew, this guy just disappeared into the night. And I'm like, who was that? What was that about? Come on. Well, as I'm walking along, again, I got hundreds of people in front of me, can't see anything. But I get to a point where I can see at an angle. And Jeff, they're doing it. Every race, every creed, every color, every age. They are walking on fire. And my brain is like, you've got to be kidding me. What's wrong with these people? Why would they do this? Metaphorically, what's going on here? And so now I'm mesmerized. I'm just staring at it. It's like a car accident that you're not supposed to look at, but you stare at it anyway. And so I'm in a trance watching these people. Well, the next thing I know, boom, guess where I am? I'm at the front of the line. Front of the line, baby. It's fight or flight time, baby. And so I'm staring into the abyss. I'm looking down at that lane, and those coals are glowing bright red. There's a wheelbarrow there. You can feel the heat coming off. And there's a trainer standing there. And all of a sudden the trainer goes, eyes up. Oh, shoot. Yeah, right. That's right. Okay. I'm in a room with Robbins for 10 hours. Guess what he teaches you to do? Keep your eyes up. Look to the end. Look to the celebration. Don't stare at what you fear. Kind of metaphor for life, right?
Right.
So now my eyes are up, and the trainer goes, squeeze your fist and say yes. And I went, yes. And he went, stronger. And I went, yes. Well, he could tell I was not in a peak state. I was leaving a lot on the table. So he screamed at me, stronger. I threw my hands in the air and screamed as loud as I could. And he goes, go, go, go. I took off. Well, here's the first thing I learned about firewalking. When you take the first step, I'm guarantee you'll take the second, third, fourth, and fifth. You're not going to stop on that fire lane, right?
Right.
So he positions two people at the end of the fire lane that lock their arms. And they're like, and they stop you. And they're like, stop, wipe your feet and celebrate. So I'm wiping my feet and I'm celebrating. And all of a sudden it dawns on me. I burnt myself really bad, really bad. And I lift up my foot and I look at it. It's dirty, but there's actually no burns. Oh, it's my other foot. I look at it. It's dirty, but there's no burns. And now I'm looking back. I'm looking at the coals. I wasn't going to do it. I just did it. I just walked across coals that were 1,000 degrees and I didn't burn myself. And you know what? I didn't have a clue how I did it. None. But I done it, right? You ever done that? You ever done something really cool and you're like, that's right. This guy here, I did that, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so now you're standing in the celebration end with all these thousands of other people. And everybody is celebrating and they're jumping up and down. And I mean, at that moment, you feel like you could do anything. You could climb Everest, right? Your brain is just like in a whole different wavelength, right? Because your self-worth, your self-confidence, your self-belief just gets elevated. So your frequency comes up, and all of us collectively, it comes up at the same time. Well, here's where it gets interesting the next day. So I come in the next day, right? This is a 4-day event, by the way. This is day one, the night of day one. Now we're on day two. We're standing in the foyer. We're getting ready to go into the venue. They're staging us. And I'm standing there, and to this day, I've never seen or witnessed anything like that either. Because people were laughing. They were crying. They were talking. They were communicating. They were hugging. Unlike anything I'd ever seen in my entire life. It was just beautiful. It was gorgeous to see. And I'm like, what the hell? I mean, did we drink the Kool-Aid last night? Right? I mean, what's going on?
It was a mutual connection.
It was
mutual triumph.
It's like I call it like a near-death experience, right? When you survive something where you almost get killed, there's a connection between those humans forever.
Right.
And that's what was going on here. It was obviously it wasn't a near death, but it was pretty darn close. Well, later in the event, I met one of Tony's trainers, a guy by the name of Ted Macy, super, super great guy. And so I'm talking and I'm like, dude, this must be really awesome that you get to spend time in this environment and be around it, be exposed to it. He goes, oh yeah, it's freaking unbelievable. And he said, as a matter of fact, you see all those people over there with the black shirts with the pink writing on them? Yeah. He goes, those are volunteers, man. Those are people just like you that came to an event and came back and volunteer. So when you get home, call Robbins Research, tell them you want a volunteer crew application. They'll send it to you, fill it out, send it back. And who knows, maybe you'll get chosen. Well, I did that. And about 7 weeks after I filled out that application, sent it in, I got a letter in the mail. It said, Dave Albin, congratulations. You've been selected to crew with the Anthony Robbins companies in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And there I was, man. my foot was in the door. Well, my application explains my credentials and where I might fit best on the team. I had a military background. I had a security background. So they immediately wanted to put me on Tony's security team to help take care of the celebrities. Because I was living on a farm and knew how to use tools and log splitters and drive equipment and stuff, they said, hey, man, he'll be perfect on the fire team as well. And that's where I landed. And that was in, 95, 96. Well, in 96, they made me a subcontractor. Because as a volunteer, I think I volunteered 5 or 6 times. And you have to pay your way, right? You have to pay you got to pay your airfare, your hotel, your food. But when you become a subcontractor, they pay for all that and they pay you a little salary, very little. But at least I was getting paid and not having to shell out $2,000 every time I wanted to be in the environment.
Sure.
And then in 2003, man, my life took another turn. And Tony offered me the fire captain's position, which meant that I would take over all of his firewalks globally. And I originally said no. And they asked why. And I said, because I homeschool my kids. And they said, oh, okay, well, we missed that. So what if we pay to have your kids and your family go on the road with us? Will that make a difference? Well, yeah.
Wow.
So there my kids are, man. Their first
It's
event.
Tremendous experience.
Homeschooled, right? And their first event was in Sydney, Australia.
Wow.
So
they didn't learn anything through that journey, did they?
Right. Being around, Tony Robbins and all these celebrities and CEOs and, you name it, man. It was what an experience it was. Because they were 6 and 9 when they first firewalked. My daughter was 6. Wow. My son was 9 years old the first time they trekked across the coals. 2005, 2 years later, we went to London, and my family with me in tow, right? We set a world record. We firewalked 12,300 people. We did it in the Docklands. Yeah, we did it in the Docklands out at the Excel Center in London. In fact, Tony's there this weekend. He's in Birmingham at UPW in the UK as we speak right now. So that was a world record. Now I want to disclose, Guinness was not there. So it's not, Guinness didn't title it as a world record. But here's what I can tell you. There's never been a firewalk that big anywhere in the world, other than maybe another Tony Robbins seminar, right? Because I think they have 9,000 at this event. Well, this one here we did was 12,300. And then that was in 05. And then what's that?
I mean, just having that many people go through that. How long did that take? A day?
A little over. Well, we had like 30, I think we had 37 lanes. It was a little over an hour. It goes pretty fast, man. People, when they're walking, they're walking. They're not strolling, right? They're not lollygagging.
I guess you're not taking a Sunday stroll on the fire line.
Not taking a Sunday stroll, bro.
And I hadn't thought of having multiples. I guess my frame of reference was the fire line that we had on the screen.
Lane. Yeah, no, we had 37 lanes, I believe.
So let me just pause for a second, because obviously when you get on a roll, you get on a roll. You unpacked a lot there. There's a big open loop for me that I hope you don't mind if we take a step back.
Please do.
So 5 years old, you go live with your aunt and uncle.
Yes. And
then at 11, you realize your aunt and uncle aren't your mom and dad, that they are your aunt and uncle. So what happened where you're just not recalling? What happened to the memory there of, I started out with mom and my brothers and sisters, and then I ended up with my aunt and uncle. Was there something what happened there?
I think how it kind of unfolded for me is that the first 5-6 years was magical, right? Camping, Yosemite, Big Bear, Lake Arrowhead, traveling around. I was able to take friends with me when we went camping. I grew up on a street with like 30, maybe 40 kids that we've all stayed in contact with to this day. We had 2 guys that grew up on my street that ended up playing in the NFL. So we were really tight group of people, right? So I had friends. Yep. In fact, one of my buddies, he just passed away here a month ago, and his dad worked for Procter and Gamble. And every time I would walk by his house, I could see him back there in the garage. And he was always tinkering with something. He built dune buggies, and, you know, because he was so mechanical and engineering, he was always tinkering with something. And he'd see me, and I'd stop and look at his Walt Pasco. And Walt would say, "Hey, boy, what are you doing? Come back here. I want to show you something." He knew. He knew that my parents were drinking, and he knew that I was going through hell. And so he would bring me in, right? And I had other parents on my street that did that as well. And then I had a lot of good buddies. You know, back in those days, we'd get on our bicycles, and I was in East Long Beach, so I could ride to Seal Beach and go to the beach. You know, it probably took less than an hour to ride our bikes there. So I found things to do.
Yeah. I mean, you know, from a historical perspective, there's I would call it like a magical time capsule of this idyllic living in California in that time period. I mean, what a blessing to have been a youth in that time. Why do you think, do you mind sharing, if you know, why your aunt and uncle decided to, you know, get you up to speed at age 11?
I don't know. I questioned this for years.
Interesting.
You know, I reserved myself because, like my biological father, right? I've never seen a picture, nothing. And so I got to a point where I was like, okay, you know, that intrigued me more than anything else. Who's my dad? Right. And something magical happened with that. When my mom got sick, she was living in California still, my biological mother, we brought her, we were living on a farm in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia at the time. And so I brought her to the farm, and she lived her final days there. And when she passed, we were going through her things, and we found a book. And the book was pilots in Korea. And I remember thinking, oh, man, I'm going to see my dad for the first time, right? I'm really excited about that. And, you know, the other thing about that, Jeff, is that I made peace with that. I'm like, look, I'm not going to drag that into my future. I get it. You know, he did the best he could. You know, Bob and Pat, Albin, who raised me, they did the best they could. My mom, who's now living with me in the final years of their life, because Bob and Pat had already passed away by this time, she did. They all did the best they could. And I was okay with that. So I looked through this book, right, where I think I'm going to find my dad. Didn't find him. My wife went through it. I went through it. She went through it. We went through it like what felt like a dozen times. We never found my dad because I had his name on my live birth certificate. His name was in there, right? Yeah. So I had it. And then I was like, you know, what's she doing with this book? My dad was a pilot in Korea, and here's a book. I mean, how is he not in there, right?
Right.
Well, years later, a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2018, my son and I were out to dinner. And when we go out to dinner, we always take really amazing care of all the servers because that's just the way we like to roll, right? We talk to them. I tell them my mom was a server at the Roosevelt Hotel. She taught me to to treat all servers with love and kindness and respect. And so they love that. They want to hear that. They love the story about mom, right? And so we're sitting there and I'm eating dinner. All of a sudden I look up and I look at my son and I go, oh my God, I'm having dinner with my dad's grandson. And Jeff, I can see my dad in his face. And I think because I remained open to the idea that I was okay, I was going to love my dad regardless of what happened and then him take his own life and all that, it was like that moment was given to me in time. And it was so
that's beautiful.
It was, man. It was my son's looking at me like, okay, Dad, what's going on? Why are you looking at me like that? Right. And I got to share that with him because it was good for him too. Right. Because that's his grandfather. Right.
Sure.
And so it was a really magical moment. And of course I told my daughter and so, you know, we've just enjoyed that moment. It was so magical and such a beautiful blessing in us. And again, it was so releasing, right? So it allowed me to continue to go through life, living a life that's I know I'm blessed. I've been given so many wonderful things in my life, and so I choose, right? That's my choice.
Right.
Viktor Frankl taught us that in Man's Search for Meaning, right? You choose, man.
There's the operative word, choosing. You know, and you said something else about, I think it was in '88, drinking. You were thinking of ending it, and or you shared about something being more than an idea. And I actually jotted that down. So I'll have to review my notes because I make notes as we go along because I
Yeah.
share out moments from our time together then with everybody so they can maybe get a little sampling and then get into the full show later. But it struck me because we can't just chase these ideas. There's got to be, this was it. There's got to be a bigger purpose. That bigger purpose was not abandoning those children.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
And that's kind of interesting because when I got to AA, the 12 steps help take care of the wreckage of the past, right? And in the preamble of AA, it says, when anyone anywhere reaches out, I want the hand of AA to be there. And for that, I'm responsible. Well, I live by that creed. And so when you're dealing with AA in the personal development industry and they're coming together at the same time, it's magical. Because what happened to me is I realized the two most important times in my life was the moment I was born and the moment I figured out why. And that came from firewalking hundreds of thousands of people and watching them transform right on the spot. So I knew I was destined to do that. And, I wondered it sometimes, I'm traveling all over the world and it's wonderful. And I'm with Tony and I'm with all these other really cool people, but you still question it sometimes. Like, why am I here? What's going on? We did an event where I got clarity on that. We did an event in Tampa and there was a young man there, was a collegiate athlete in high school and he got hit by a drunk driver and he lost both legs. So his whole identity got shaken. His life changed in a heartbeat and he was contemplating suicide. And one of his buddies said, hey, I know you like Tony Robbins. He's coming to town. Why don't you go see Tony before you take your life? Well, and he did. Well, I don't know. We're out there. We're at the Firewalk. It's midnight. Couple thousand people. It's dark. You can't really see anything. And all of a sudden, Tony turned and he looked at me and he had a really bizarre look on his face. Like, what's going on? Well, I can't see the kid in the wheelchair. Next thing you know, there he is. This kid wheeled his wheelchair right up to the lane and he had a lot of upper body strength. And Tony bent down to whisper, like, do you need help? What's going on? And this kid went like, no, go. I got this. Well, the next thing we know, Jeff, this kid positioned himself, got his torso up on the top of that wheelchair, and he flung himself forward. He landed on his hands, and he walked across the fire. And
on his hands.
On his hands. And
That's
I went,
incredible.
Okay, I get it. Now I know why I'm here. And it was beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And so that was really kind of it, right? Because I also believe that people have two lives. And the second one starts when we realize we have only one. And so that kid created his own purpose that day. Look what I did. I walked across the fire on my hands when everybody else was walking on their feet.
Right.
When I do seminars and I go out and corporations.
Which, just to pause real quick as a reminder of how blessed most of us are truly to have the physical ability to get up and walk each day. The physical ability to go earn and provide for ourselves, for our families each day. It's really a reminder in that, because as everybody who could walk on their own 2 feet is sitting there maybe contemplating if they should do this, maybe not do this, whatever. Here's a guy who's recreating his whole ability to believe in himself and goes and walks on his hands.
Yeah, well, that was
Just
in Paris.
powerful.
What you guys are seeing right there, we were in Paris in 2019. That's my son next to me there. This is Frederick, super, super cool guy. Again, we're in Paris. We did a world record glass walk there for 1,500 people. And one of the people that were helping me ran up and grabbed me and said, hey, this guy needs to talk to you. And I went over and I met him and he goes, hey man, I'd like to kind of walk on my hands. And I said, let's do it. Why not? And so that's what we did there.
Because at this point, you've seen it before.
I've seen him walk on fire. So why can't he walk on broken glass? Right. So, when I do my seminars, I put a picture of a guy on the screen behind me and I just leave it up there. I don't say anything about it for at least 30 minutes. And you can see that he's clearly standing at the top of Mount Everest. His name's Eric Weinmeier. And so we're kind of talking and I'm, getting people to start to understand that life is all about state management. Life is all about the story you tell yourself. Life is all about the story that you create. So when something happens to you, I don't care what it is, you create the story. So create a good one. So I get to a point and I'll go, so who here can tell me where Eric is standing? And, it's pretty obvious. They'll go, well, he's standing at the top of Mount Everest. That's correct. So let me tell you something else about Eric. He's climbed the 7 highest mountains on earth. And he summited every single one of them. And let me tell you something about Eric. He's blind. So guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your lame ass excuse about why you can't or can't do something. If a blind man can climb the 7 highest mountains on this planet, you can do anything you decide you want to do. And the only reason you're not doing it is one of 2 reasons. One, you're allowing fear to control your life, or you just want to make up a story so you get attention. So my encouragement to you is that you are here for a reason. So find out what it is. There is a purpose here. Yeah. And, it works. Right? So.
No, it does. I mean, one of the themes, again, I shared, and I'm not going to turn this episode into promoting my book. I've got a whole day planned with Chris to do that in August. But to the point of what you just shared, the story we create, I often tell people, like, you've created this major motion picture, IMAX theater quality, big IMAX screen and seats.
Yep.
And you're the only one watching.
That's right.
No one cares. No one cares. It's not that big of a deal. It's not something that should hold you back. It's this big thing that you've created, and you're there on your own. And all you have to do is just get up, walk out of that theater.
Well,
now,
what does it say?
That doesn't change. That doesn't change what happened, And I mean, I share this as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. It's part of what I talk about in my book. And I look at that as, I'm here now in this time. I've come to realize it. I'm here now to stand up for those 1 in 6 other men that are struggling with this and just can't get the words out of their mouth, because that's the story that's held them back. And so I don't say any of what I just said to minimize anything that's happened to anybody.
Of course.
I say it to say, I'm there with you with that horrible, big, major motion picture story. And I got up and walked out of the damn theater.
I love that. People ask all the time, if you could go back in your life and change something in your childhood, what would it be? And my answer is nothing. Why would I do that? Yeah. Because now I'm depriving myself of the wisdom going into my future. No. I had to go through that to get where I am now, because what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you, period. It's just the way it is. And I tell people, don't look at my glory, just listen to my story, because we all go through it. It's just the way it is. Because you know what I've learned, Jeff? People don't care about how much money you've made or how successful you are or how great you think you are. You know what they want to hear about? Your struggles and how you overcame them.
That's right.
Because those they can use. Those are real, because we all go through it. And that's the hardest part to go through. So there you are telling your story about your sexual abuse. And if you can help one guy, by all means. And who knows? It does not necessarily have to be a male. It could be a female that you've helped.
Yeah, so, for women, it's 1 in 4.
Yeah, because that's high. Right.
And I think that number is actually reflective of just abuse as a minor, not, assaults as a woman, but as an adult woman. But at any rate, I mean, to me, there's an often cliched statement of, it doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. And I challenge people to really get comfortable with that for us part. For me, there were other young men, 2 of them are no longer on this earth due to suicide. And I looked at it as, and this grates people at times. It really says, how could you possibly say what I'm about to say? I believe God put me in that place to take that abuse because I could handle it. And I wouldn't be that creation that was ended from that evil.
Right.
And now I'm here to talk about it. And everybody's got that power to believe in that connection to their story. Right?
Right. Well, I ask all the time in the audience, why don't people get what they want in life? And I get I get the answers. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I don't have the education. I don't have the background. I don't have the resources. I'm too young. I'm too old. Blah, 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 blah. No, why you don't get what you want in life is there's a story you created about why you can't have it. And I'll guarantee you that it's a lie.
Yep.
So stop lying to yourself. Step into your greatness. I get stepping into your greatness is scary. I get it. When I got hired by Google, because when I got to the end with Tony in 2014, right? I'm driving down the road, my phone rings and it's Google and they want to hire me. And I'm like, okay, how often does that happen? And
right.
So we got to talking and, I was available and they wanted to know whether I was under any non-compete or contractual obligation. No, homeboy's a free agent. I can do what I want. And so we started talking about a firewalk. Well, they had 148 executives that were graduating in Mountain View. And so I said, well, look, man, I can't do this during the day. I can't do a firewalk. I've got to be able to see the calls. I got to be able to see the redness and the temperature, and I regulate that based on the color of the calls. And I use a shovel to beat them down, and there's just things that I do. So it's a safety issue. I said, but let me tell you what I can do instead of, because they wanted to graduate in the middle of the afternoon. They wanted to do a lunch and then graduate and then do the experience and then have a couple of beers after. And I said, well, we can do a glass walk, and that's where I'll teach these graduates to walk on broken glass. They went, what? Walk on broken glass? I go, yeah. They go, ooh, that's interesting. Tell us about that. So I did. And they went for it. In fact, when I got there, they were like, hey, I got a couple questions for you. There's a scene from Die Hard. And before we bring you out on stage, we want to show this where Bruce Willis is running across the broken glass, right? His feet are all bloody. Are you okay if we show that? I thought, you're my kind of people, man. Let's do it.
Yep.
And then they wanted to play that song by Annie Lennox, Walking on Broken Glass.
Yep.
Right? So I said, yeah, sure, do it. And they brought me out and away we went. In fact, we did 2 gigs for Google. And then, I went on from there, I went to NASA and then Notre Dame and then Virginia Tech and Remax and Heineken and the Entrepreneur Organization and Chick-fil-A and the YMCA. And I mean, it just kept going. But when I was flying out there to Google for my first gig, right, I got halfway there and all of a sudden that little guy jumped up on my shoulder and said, hey, you're going to Google. What makes you think you're good enough to be able to be hired by Google, right?
So even after
all that,
nearly 20 years of helping others rise to that challenge and make change.
Yep.
There's that little son of a bitch on your shoulder.
Son of a bitch, man. And he's, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. And he's just yakking. And it was cool. All of a sudden, my other buddy jumped up on the other side, and he goes, like whispered in my ear, goes, Dave, just so you know, you set a world record in London in 2005. You firewalked 12,300 people. So tell him to shut the hell up.
Yeah.
It was like this conflict. It's like this, these voices going off in your head. And, we all go through that, Jeff, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not worthy. We're not smart enough. We're not good enough. And, you really got to silence that.
Yeah.
I'm the voice. I will lead, not follow. I will believe, not doubt. Right. And so you start like an incantation, if you will. And the next thing you know, again, it's all state management. It really is physiology and what you're telling yourself, and you get into your rituals and but you know what? Even to this day, every once in a while, I get doubt. But the cool thing, based on the way I've lived my life, I can overcome it now. Because here's the key. It's understanding that everything we do in life there's a pattern of doubt. What has to happen for those doubts to come into your head? If you don't eat right, that's a pattern. If you do eat right, that's a pattern. If you work out, that's a pattern. So Tony teaches it. Once you understand patterns and how they work and how they evolve, and you can overcome the ones that don't serve you, man, can you change your life in a heartbeat?
Yeah, that's very, very smart and great wisdom to share. As we coming near to wrap our time up, I'd be remiss. So when you got on my schedule and I saw the connection to Tony, I knew it was like, okay, this is going to be a good show because it's kind of the way the universe works, right? I'm looking at a little Dan Kennedy. Dan Kennedy is okay, Dan, so long-time marketer.
Oh yeah, he's the man.
actually worked with Tony way back in the day
Yes,
when he
did.
got on infomercials with Gunthy Renker.
Absolutely.
And so I'm reading when you get on my schedule, and I wish, shucks, I should have, wait, nope. I thought I had it up here. I guess it's downstairs. So I'm reading a little piece, an expertly created marketing piece by Dan called the 11 And really, it's just a long form sales letter for his services. But inside that was about the positioning of Tony on TV through infomercials,
Yeah.
which is how you met him way, way back.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to share that because I thought it was just so interesting that I've been a Dan follower and fan and friend for 15 years now, 15 years now. And here we are today. So the lesson there is, if Dan wouldn't have shared and believed in his greatness to stand aside Gunthy Renker and go after that client, maybe we're not here today at all.
Nope. No way.
And that little ripple effect's real, right?
Right. Well, it's funny about Tony's infomercials back in the day. People thought it was a show.
Mm-hmm.
They thought Tony Robbins had a show. Right.
That's when you know you've done an infomercial right, when people think it's actually television.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Tony used to get that all the time. Hey, Tony, I saw your show the other day. Right. Yeah, okay, it's an infomercial. Thank you, Gunthy Renker. Yeah, they nailed it. Because, Tony would, back in the day, if you remember, it was him and the Floby, right? Mm-hmm. That device, you put it on your head and it would suck your hair up and it would cut it, I think it was called. Oh, man. Yeah, right. Yep. And I don't know if Dan had anything to do with that, probably, because I know they sold a lot of them. I think
he's been on involved in a lot. Gold by the Inch. There was another personal development program, the Think and Grow Rich program, Psycho-Cybernetics. So he's been in a lot of it. So, man, I've just enjoyed our time together. So to catch people up to your journey, so through 2014 you worked with Tony, and then you had your own career for about 10 years, and now you retired in the Appalachian Mountains.
Well, I'm still at it. Two things happen right now. People call me, hey Dave, my company's melting down, I need your help. We'll write you a check. You come bring the Firewalk, the board break, to the company, take care of everything, and let's crush the dissension, because everybody's fighting over, Donald Trump and Biden and mask wearing and vaccines. It's like, shut up. Look, man, from a company perspective, a CEO is like, if you don't fix that, let me tell you something, your production's going to tank. And they know it. Right. So they can call me and I come in and we fix that, right? Because it goes back to, the day after I do what I do for them, it's like the day after my Firewalk. All those people, we're all standing there. We're all getting along amazingly, right? Well, that's what the Firewalk's going to do. The Firewalk doesn't care what you think about Donald Trump or what you think about Joe Biden. It doesn't care, right? Because it brings us back to a humanistic culture. And so they can write a check. Well, last year I started the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy, and I got another one coming up in October. I think we literally have 2 spots left. I do 9 people at a time. We've sold 7 tickets. And so what you do is you come and you spend a week with me. So basically I have 4 types of clients for that. I have like corporate America, where they send somebody from the HR department, they send them, we train them, they go back in their own company, and then they're able to facilitate all these corporate team building, life-changing experiences on their own. And then I have entrepreneurs and business owners who want to come learn it and then take that back into their own companies. Then I have trainers and coaches, if you will, that come to me, and then, we train them, and they spend a week with me here in the Appalachian Mountains, and we teach them the glass walk and the Firewalk and the board break and the arrow break and the rebar bending and the storytelling and everything, right? How to sell yourself, how to join a chamber of commerce, how to get your name out there, what to say, what not to say, how to talk to fire marshals, how to get events approved, how to get the insurance, all of it. So when they come in and they leave, they're done. They can facilitate. And then they've got me as a backup, right? Like I went to the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy and I was certified by the guy that, did Tony Robbins for almost 2 decades. So that's coming up in October. That's all on my website. So that's kind of where we are now. But I am scaling back. I got 2 grandkids. I got a granddaughter that was just born on Good Friday, and I want to spend more time with my kids. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, congratulations on the growing family. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
It's awesome. Man, I have thoroughly enjoyed our time here.
Thanks, man. Me too.
And I appreciate you sharing as much as you did, the amount that you did, the way you did. So thank you.
My pleasure, man.
Thank you so much for that. Yep.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Let's do it again.
Yep. We will. You're welcome.
Cool.
You're welcome. Thanks again for being on the show, and everyone else, take care, right? Remember what they've shared with us. If it doesn't challenge us, it doesn't change us. So between this show and next show, go out and make that challenge happen, make that change happen. We'll see you next week, and take care. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of The Big Ticket Life. You've heard from another amazing guest living their own big ticket life, and now it's time to live yours. First, I'd love for you to take me up on my free gift to you. Claim your gift at gift.thebigticketlife.live. That's gift.thebigticketlife.live. See, all your life you've been told what is and what isn't possible by the loudest voices from the cheapest seats. It's time to finally do life and business on your terms. Sure, you've heard similar things, but without clarity on what can be done, it's easy to have your customers, employees, maybe even partners, and your spouse keep you from truly living a big ticket life. My big ticket methods shift you into that investor seat in your business, away from commodity and away from competition, into a market of one, so you can finally live your own big ticket life. So my gift to you is for you to book your discovery call today, where we'll uncover first the Chivo behaviors, those chief everything officer behaviors that hold you back, and why moving into the investor seat in your own business is critical. 2, we'll uncover the premium position that's up for grabs right now in your market that you're missing out on. And 3, which big ticket methodologies are just waiting to be dropped into your business to explode your sales and profits. So again, thanks for listening to this episode. I'd love for you to take action right now. Accept this gift. Book your call. Go to gift.thebigticketlife.live. Again, that's gift.thebigticketlife.live.